So when it comes to job postings, make it attractive.
Yeah.
Make it attractive. Make it something that you, if you're past that stage in the game and you have maybe a 20-year-old, 30-year-old kid or 25, like, what would make him or her, your daughter or son, apply that, and make you as a father or wife say, or husband, what mom say, I'm proud of her for working there. That sounds like a pretty good opportunity. That's going to attract people.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Trained Well, where we help insurance agents sell more, train faster, and win bigger. I'm George Elossais, and today we got a special guest with us, Alex Shattuck, an insurance industry powerhouse who has not only built a highly successful insurance agency, but is also now changing the game in recruiting with his company, Autopilot Recruiting. Alex's story is nothing short of inspiring. He started his insurance journey after leaving the U.S. Marines, and within just a few years, Alex went from building his first agency to opening up multiple offices across Michigan. In fact, he grew his business by over 10 times in just under a decade, while cutting his hours back dramatically. And today, Alex is going to explain how he did it. And I promise it wasn't just by working harder, it was about working smarter and by building an exceptional team. As if that wasn't enough, Alex took everything he learned from growing his own agency and founded Autopilot Recruiting, a company designed to help other agency owners build their teams and do it without the headaches. Through Autopilot, Alex and his team help agencies find top talent, fill positions with ease, and keep the recruiting process on autopilot so owners can get back to doing what they do best, running their business and growing their production. Alex is also a best-selling author of two books, Small Business, Big Recruiting, and Complacency Kills Insurance Sales. In his books, Alex shares actionable advice on how small businesses and insurance agencies can build championship teams, attract top talent, and avoid the pitfalls that many agency owners fall into when it comes to hiring and team building. Today, Alex is here to talk about his journey in insurance, his philosophy on team building, and how he's been able to help countless business owners and agents grow their teams and scale their agencies. Whether you're an agent just starting out or an established agency owner, Alex has some real world insights and tactics that will help you take your business to the next level. So, without further ado, let's dive into the conversation. Alex, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
How'd I do? Is that okay?
You did great. You did
That,
great. And I got a chance to hear your last name pronounced. That was the first time I
okay.
read it, and I was like, I'm not even going to try.
Yeah, a lot of people have questions about that one, so appreciate it. But cool. Well, Alex, I always start with this. You were born, now you're here. What happened in between? What's your story?
Man, that's how much time we got. Um,
As much as you need. So,
yeah, well, I'll try to stay relevant. There's a lot to my story that I'm sure none of your listeners care to hear about, so I'll try to spare you some of that stuff. But I'll get into how I got into insurance. That's probably something people are curious about. I don't know if my bio said it or not, but I worked for an agent before becoming one. That was something that maybe I wasn't clear on. So I'm an agent right now, obviously, with several offices here in Michigan, like you said. But I started out working for an insurance agent, a local agent, and before that, you mentioned my Marine Corps experiences a little bit, and so transitioning from Marine Corps to selling insurance, that was a big change, big change for me. And I got lucky in a sense that someone gave me an opportunity that um, I knew for most of my life that this guy, still an agent today. I'm still close with him today. I grew up with his kids, and so I grew up hanging out in his house. He coached me in multiple sports, and he gave me a chance when I don't think too many people would, and I ran with it. And I got really excited about the opportunity to do something a little bit outside of what I was used to. My plan was, after the Marines, finish my degree in criminal justice and be a cop. That was what the natural progression for an infantry Marine was, to be a police
mhm.
officer. And so that was, my dad was in law enforcement, my brother was in law enforcement, and so that was just kind of like what we do. But this is 2009, and all the cops are getting laid off. This is during the recession, as you remember, probably. And yeah, so all the cops are getting laid off, and I thought, well, this isn't good, because I have two kids, I had a mortgage, a wife, and all that, and so I couldn't just like not have a job. And this is when this agent approached me, and I didn't realize he was recruiting me at first, which is interesting because I didn't think I was qualified to do what you all do. And after meeting with him twice, I realized that I was being recruited to work for him in an insurance sales capacity. And I said, "Hey, I'm honored, but I'm not qualified. My degree is not in business. It's not in insurance. In fact, it's not even done yet. And my background is infantry marine." And so I kindly, politely turned him down and just said, "I'm not qualified." And he said, "You don't need all of that." And then explained the licensing process and how I didn't have to have a degree yet, and I didn't have to have, insurance background or business background or any of that stuff. And so that was the first time I realized that maybe I was qualified to some degree and why I was maybe capable of doing this, and gave it a shot. And it was rough at first. We didn't have a lot like nowadays, you're like folks like yourself have give so much resources to agents and team members that allow this thing to not say like you don't get to skip multiple stages, but you do get to hit fast forward a little bit in the training cycle, right? Like for us back in the day, we went, me and my buddy Josh, that he's still an agent today also.
Mhm.
We started together and we're still doing our thing, but we went door to door. We knocked on doors, we called random, it was just like whatever we could do to generate activity. We really didn't know what we were doing. We just luckily stuck with it long enough to figure it out. And that's one piece of advice I have for your audience is stick around long enough to figure it out. It's not an overnight process, but we didn't have a George to train us, right? So um, it worked out, but nowadays things are a little bit different in that sense. But so anyway, had some success, obviously, working as a team member, working for an agent, and was given the opportunity to open up an agency and took over an existing book of business in a small town in Owasso, Michigan. Oh, 15,000 as far as the population goes. And then I
Wow.
launched a second agency, similar size town, mid-Michigan also. And this was a scratch agency. So no customers, just starting from nothing. And then my third location was also an existing book of business over on the west side of the state. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And that's also, I think my experience, I know we'll probably get into recruiting a little bit. My experience getting recruited is also probably why I'm so passionate about recruiting. Because I love looking for people that don't even understand that they're qualified to do what we do, that diamond in the rough, folks that over other agents are overlooking. And man, some of my best people that work for my agencies, you wouldn't have necessarily gone out of your way to recruit them because on paper they don't look like much. And then you get in front of them, you speak to them, and you say, "Holy smokes, this person's got this, whatever it is, like this person's got it." And they sell a hell of a lot of insurance for me. And
Sure.
so it's been a lot of fun.
So where were you at, like in your agency journey, where you were like, I'm going to start helping other people with recruiting?
That happened on accident. I didn't have this grand plan of launching a second business. I was getting calls just as you were, working for the agent that you were working for, doing things at a very high level. When you do things at a high level, people reach out, and they ask you,
Hmm.
what are you doing? What's going on? And
Sure.
and my thing was always, I'd always give the team credit, and
Hmm.
I looked at, and so my message to the agents that would call is like, I have really good people and I have enough of them, having enough butts and chairs and having the right butts and chairs, things tend to go really well. And so the natural next question was, well, what are you doing to get these people? And I realized this is pre-pandemic, but not too far off from COVID hitting. Like agents were really struggling with locating and finding talent. And I didn't realize that it was that big of an issue because I always enjoyed it. That was part of the job that I really liked. I
Sure.
didn't run from it. I had the knowledge, interest, and time to do it. And so I did it. And so I thought, well, maybe if I start sharing best practices with agents, they'll just go out and they'll do it. And so I started speaking on the topic. I was already on, in the whole speaker world. I was going around talking about my story before this. Um, tying the Marine Corps stuff to insurance and all that fun stuff, like I still do to this day. But I decided I'll create a PowerPoint presentation and start talking about recruiting. And so I started going around talking about recruiting. I presented on it and told my story and message and gave them the blueprint and said, this is exactly what I do. This is what you need to do to have success. And I thought the agents would just take it and run with it and all would be great. And then I realized that's not how agents work. I forgot that. I kept getting feedback that like, hey, I love what you're doing, but I just don't want to do it. And I kept getting asked about like me referring them to a business that would do it. And I started researching it, looking for options because I really still at this point had no ambition to start a business. I was just looking for places to send these agents that were asking for help. And I couldn't find anything that was doing it the way that I did it. And the way
Mhm.
that I recruit is consistency, consistently, a little bit every single day forever. That's it. It's not anything crazy. It's a consistency piece where everything I saw out in the market for agents to pay was what I would say a short term fix to a long term problem, right? So they'd pay a bunch of money up front, maybe get a win, but at some point they're scrambling again and they're back in desperation mode. And that's just not the way I did things. And so I decided maybe I could create something that's not out there in the market yet, something that's going to be consistently done for them daily. And so I started to recruit for an agent or two myself at first. And I quickly brought on a recruiter, assigned her some agents, and then it started to work. And then I brought on more recruiters and more agents. And now we have about a team of 150, I think, which you pointed out. We
Wow.
recruit for nearly 2,000 agents across the country. And we also have other small businesses that we recruit for now as well. So we're in other industries, not just insurance. So it's become a much bigger deal than I ever anticipated. And again, that wasn't necessarily intentional, but I'm glad it's worked out because it's helping a lot of people.
Sure. Well, and now with like, those presentations that kind of happen there and now maybe even your books too, but it's kind of like the Warren Buffett approach, if you're familiar with that. So, like Warren Buffett has all these great books and he does talks on how to invest and how to find value and pick the right stocks, pick the right companies, buy and hold. But then you read those books and you realize, maybe I should just buy into Berkshire Hathaway. you know
Right.
Maybe I should just give the money to the person that's already doing this consistently. So
Good
did was
point.
that on purpose or did that just kind of happen? That's because that's what I'm seeing with your whole business, but
With specifically with autopilot and how that
with
came about.
autopilot.
Yeah. No, I don't think it was overly intentional. When I first started it, I thought I had something. I said, oh, this could be kind of a fun little, side thing. And then once I started to take off, I did start to set some more clear goals on what I wanted to grow it to
Mhm.
and everything else too. But I wanted it to be something that was affordable for agents and small business owners. Nobody wants to pay 10 to 20 grand just to see this person flake out in 3 weeks or months. And our industry has a crazy turnover. And so to pay a headhunter, extreme amounts of money, to me just didn't make sense for me or for other agents or small business owners. So I wanted something that was a monthly fee that was low, that was very affordable and almost a no-brainer to where it's like, why would I ever do this myself ever again when I can have a professional do it for me at a minimal cost? And so that's been kind of the approach. But I think what you're saying with like the whole Berkshire, investment piece is if you can just put money here and just not have to worry about everything else too, let's do that. And that's what I've tried to create in a certain sense to your point. Like I want to keep if you look at what Autopilot is doing today versus 3 or 4 years ago, it's almost 4 years now. There's been a lot of things added, a lot of value added that wasn't there initially, and the price point hasn't really changed much. So we just keep packing and adding more to it to make this offer just irresistible for people that have the business acumen to understand. Like, man, I could spend $1 and get 10 back. I'm gonna keep spending that dollar every month because this makes sense. And I've had certain folks, even in leadership positions, looking at this on a corporate level, saying, I've heard it called insurance not to suck. Like if you have this service as an insurance agent, like you're probably not going to suck, right? You're probably going to have enough team most of the time. You're probably going to have the right team most of the time. And if you have those things, you're not going to be bad at your job. You're going to be pretty darn good. It's those that struggle as an agent and actually an agency owner where they have to grow and build teams. It all comes down to team, which ultimately comes down to recruiting, which is why this worked so well for so many. Because most understand that concept.
Sure. And and I have a direction with this, but when you started the recruiting company, like where were you at in your agency? Like did we have more than one office? How big was the team? Like where were you at where you're like I've got a good enough thing going that's going to keep going where I can spend some time on the recruiting. What did that look like?
Yeah, I would have been just under a decade in with two locations and probably a year and a half away from that third. And as far as how things were going, I had a really great team, big enough team, leadership positions in both locations. And so I didn't have to, and I still don't have to physically be at any one spot any one day of the week. Each week is different for me. So I physically go in and I have a presence, have a pulse, and thoroughly enjoy what I do. But I love the fact that I don't have to be there to make things roll. I don't have to show up and push go. I have people that hold people accountable, motivate, and report back to me. And so I was in a position where I had the time, and energy to do those things. And one thing that is, I think, there's only a few things that I'm good at, but one of them is delegation and outsourcing and creating and getting my time back. I think on the flip side of that, sometimes when I do those things, I find myself getting bored, and I find things to fill that extra time with, and that might be, so it's probably a blessing and a curse because I always find ways to fill that time with other things. And autopilot, became that thing for me. I dove in, but then eventually with that too, I got to the point where I started outsourcing and delegating and growing my team. And so out of that team of 150, it's not all recruiters. We have, multiple directors, there's squad leaders, there's team leaders, I have people in quality control and communications and business strategy and marketing and you name it. And so, a CFO and all these things. And so I don't have to do all that stuff. At the beginning, I did though. At the beginning, I was wearing all of those hats, just like a new agent wears all the hats in agency. And it's hard to grow and scale a business when you have to wear all the hats all the time, and it's hard to not get burned out. It's hard to not that roll into other areas of your life. And so, um, yeah, I was running hard for a while, but I quickly realized that I needed to do some things differently, just like I did with my agency, and now it's in a really good spot.
Sure. Well, and here's why I asked too, because I want to come back to delegation too, because there's definitely some things I want to talk about there. But going back to, you said you had two locations. I always, and feel free to disagree with me on this. I'd love to get your insight on it. But I've worked with hundreds of agencies. I've seen some things in my time where it's like, it seems like everybody, when you start out as an agent, you're like a salesperson, and then your next role in the business becomes trainer. And then, especially when you get into like second office territory, now you're a recruiter in a way. Like if you've got two offices, you've got to have one location at the very least kind of going on its own, because you've got to be recruiting to fill seats. And you get to three offices, you're full blown recruiter, and you have someone helping with the recruiting. Am I on the right path? I mean, I feel like you're more experienced with this than me. Am I on the right path there? Because I feel like that's where a lot of people that get the second office end up having less production from two offices than their original, because they weren't ready to sort of be that recruiter.
Yeah, I would agree. I was kind of hoping I would disagree when you said that. I was like, maybe we can get a chance to disagree on something here that maybe make for a more entertaining podcast. But no, I would have to say I agree. I think the agents that try to skip levels or skip chapters in their journey oftentimes find themselves falling short in some area of the business. And so I do think when you first launch your agency, it's easy to look at like my agency and your agency and others that have been there and done that for a while and say, okay, I want that, and I'm going to start to operate that way. I'm going to start to delegate and outsource. I'm going to be CEO. Well, it's not time yet, in most cases. You probably
Right.
need to get in the seat. You probably got to make some phone calls. You probably got to sit across the table from some customers and run some appointments. There's been some that can jump in and play CEO, but I think that's really rare. I think that you're setting yourself up for failure. I think you can't just, I don't think there's a way to just replace hard work early on in your agency career. I think it builds character. It also will make you a better trainer in the future, a better recruiter in the future, a better leader and boss. So yes, I think when I see second office agents struggle or split their production between two versus the one, it's because they jumped in too soon. I think that if you don't have your team rocking and rolling and able to get things done without your physical presence, you're not ready to be a second office agent. I think you need to make sure you're treating your first office like you have to before you have to. Something breaks, you can fix it because you only have one. You're just kind of pretending, right? And so that's like my number one multi-office agent piece of recommendation or advice is pretend like you have to operate your one as if you have two. And if you can't do it, or if production goes down or something's slipping, you can jump back in and fix it. It means you're not ready. Give yourself some more time. But once you do that and then it starts to work and you're like, wow, I'm working 1 or 2 days a week in the office and our production's still rolling. everything's good, nobody's quitting, culture's still fine. Well, now you're probably ready to take on that second location. But but sometimes people get all, their ego gets involved. They're like, wow, this is honored to be offered this second location. But if they're doing 80% of the production, what are you going to do? You're going to go from working 40 hours to 80? I mean, you could, but is that sustainable? Is that the right thing to do for you in any way, shape, or form? And the answer is
Right.
probably not.
Right.
So yes, you have to take it in stages. And I do feel some agents can go through a certain stage faster than other agents based on their experiences, but I don't think you can skip steps. And one of those things is, yes, you have to be able to grow and build a team. And part of that is wearing a recruiter hat to some degree. But other things too, you mentioned the training, just being a good leader and culture builder and all that stuff, motivator. Um, those are all things you have to really get dialed in before you take on multiple locations.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, because then, yeah, after recruiter, after CEO, then my measure is always like the business owner test, which you're like, well, I'm a business owner. I'm like, no, like the business owner test is if you buy a stock in Apple, like you buy stock in Apple and you collect that dividend, they don't ask you to fill in at the board meeting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's like what you want to get to. And yeah, you might technically be a business owner, but you want to get to a point where that thing's running basically without you and growing without you. Like your agency kept growing, even though you have multiple businesses, which is where I want to touch more on delegation, because even for me for a long time, and even me still sometimes I catch myself finding it difficult to delegate. I don't know if it's a trust thing, I don't know if it's emotional. I more just kind of double down and do it logically, and I will delegate things. But have you ever had that struggle? How'd you overcome that struggle? And how do you help other agents overcome that?
Yeah, I definitely did early on. You mentioned early as an agent, you should be selling, and I was. And I think when you are good at it, which I was, it's hard to walk away from it. I always, like, I remember specifically thinking to myself that I was like in my agency, my little agency, I was like the Michael Jordan of like life insurance sales, right? I couldn't imagine not being on the court playing. And then it was probably after year two, maybe year three, that we had another good year, but still didn't hit like the some of the higher levels that I had other agents hitting that I wanted to hit.
Hmm.
And I started asking myself, like, real honestly, like, what's my problem? Why am I not getting there yet? And I remember thinking to myself, like, okay, it's either I'm not good enough, or so I'm missing something, and maybe I need to work
Hmm.
harder. And I thought, well, I'm not. I think I'm good enough. Like, I don't think I'm like bad at this thing. Like, maybe I need to work harder. And I thought to myself, like, man, I've been working pretty hard. Like, I don't know, like, how much harder can I work? What are they doing? And I started to really pay attention to those that were getting it done at a very high level consistently. And there's exceptions to this rule, but the vast majority of them weren't doing the bulk of the selling. Like they were, some were doing some, but many were getting it done through their teams. They had bigger teams than me. They had better teams than me at the time. And so I thought, well, hell, maybe I'll start to, grow my team a little bit and maybe pour into them a little bit more and invest into their, development. And so I started bringing them into joint appointments and just really encouraging them and coaching them more and adding to their team. And I thought that as I removed myself slowly, that I would start to take maybe a step back with production, which I was ready to make that commitment to make sure long term I could be where I wanted to be. But we never did take a dip. We ended up selling more insurance because of it. I realized that, and I remember driving home thinking this through. That Michael Jordan analogy, I remember thinking like 5 Scottie Pippens are better than one Michael Jordan, and that's what I find is I don't need a Michael Jordan, and I'm not even sure if I was Michael Jordan, but like I don't need one. I need 5 Scottie Pippens all the time, and that would win way more championships than one Michael Jordan and a bunch of cats that can't hoop, right? So, um, that's what I started to focus on, and that's what got me to the levels I want to get to. And that's what's kept me there and sustained it over the years without me having to work more. In fact, I've been able to work less and accomplish much, much more because of that. So that was the mindset shift for me. But I find agents sometimes, I had one agent, he admittedly said this to me while recruiting. He's like, I kind of feel like by hiring Autopilot, it's admitted failure on my part for not being able to do it. And I need to get over that. And that, I don't think he's the only one that feels that way about outsourcing and delegating. He was just the only one that was honest enough to say that to me. And I think that's where we have to really, really check ourselves and ask ourselves the question, like, is it admitted failure Or are we just being smart business owners by outsourcing and delegating?
Right.
Like I want to, if I can find something that someone can do as good or better or even close, like it's off my plate. If you can do it 80, 85% as good as me, take it, take it. Because then I get my time back to do other things that are more productive, for the business or whatever. So that's another thing too. Agents oftentimes think, well, this person can't do this as good as me, so I have to keep it. That's not true. It's not true. And what you also find is when you think someone might be 80 or 85% as good as you at something, so you let it go, what you'll find sometimes that person becomes 110% of what you were because they have less on their plate. When you make someone, you hire a recruiter to recruit, she's going to recruit better than you did because that's her only thing. When you have someone handling your payroll and your books for you, like they're going to do it better than you because that's their only thing. So when you can get specialization going in your agency, everything is going to be at a higher level. If you get someone focusing just on life insurance sales, they're going to sell life insurance at a higher level than someone that's selling 5 product lines, right? So it's not to say you shouldn't have generalists and those things too, but just understand that like we got to get out of our own way. We have to get out of our own way and understand that someone gave us an opportunity, someone believed in us once upon a time, and we might want to start doing that ourselves to others. And if we do that successfully, we're going to enjoy the agency experience way more than what we're experiencing now if you've been not able to get over that hump of delegation and outsourcing.
Sure. Well, and it's one of those things too where it's like kind of like you were experiencing and we've experienced too, where like maybe production is sort of getting like you kind of hit a plateau. Things are staying the same. Maybe it's dipping, and as a business owner, it's basically just a game of solving constraints. And it's kind of tough to realize that the big constraint is staring you right in the face in the mirror every day because you can only do so much. But with recruiting too, like personally, I've noticed like you can catch a bug and it can be a good bug or a bad bug. So like good bug is like, for like my training company, for example, I had 0 employees for a while, and then I had one that really hit it out of the park, like right away. And then I got to 3 people within 2 weeks. Like I was like within 3, like 0 to 3 within 2 weeks. And my wife was like, that's a lot of people. But I was like, trust me, it'll be worth it. But then sometimes it goes the other way. Like you get 1 bad hire, 2, 3, and then you're like, boy, I couldn't imagine even paying 3-4 thousand a month for an employee. What do you say to that agent, that business owner that's like kind of giving up on it? And they're like, maybe it's just going to be me, and whatever I get, I get. So
Well, I think that if their experiences lead to, or if they've seen consistent turnover, not having the right people in the right seats, they also have to, you mentioned looking in the mirror and understanding that part of it, or a good part of it, might be their inability to lead a team. I had an agent one time, he wasn't overly complaining about the service, but he's like, hey, I've hired 4. I'm like, well, that sounds like he was talking about whether he was getting ROI on it, right? I'm like, well, that sounds like a pretty good deal. In recent months hiring 4 people, he's like, yeah, but only 3 have stuck around. I was like, okay, well, even one, I guess, is not a bad deal considering what you've paid. And he's like, yeah, but this person's not even that good. And I said, you know what? Hold on a second. Like, at what point are you going to take some responsibility for some of that? And he said, what do you mean? I go, well, if I hired those same 4 people, I bet I'd have more than one still around. And out of those that I had, I bet there'd be multiple that would be better than the person that's selling for you right now. Because I have a way of onboarding people, I have a way of retaining talent, I have a good culture. My team has leaders within it. I can lead, I feel, effectively. And so I don't necessarily think what you're experiencing is an autopilot recruiting problem. I think it's a you problem. And he didn't necessarily disagree. But that's important to keep in mind that you got to work on yourself, or you're going to have problems. You can hire autopilot recruiting, but if nobody wants to work for you, it's going to be. I mean, I would say it's job security for us because we're going to have to consistently fill seats. But you're still not going to love us because you're never going to have the right people long enough to really see what this thing could do for you long term and how much money it can make you long term. It's keeping you afloat, but it's not making you love life, love the business, love, the money. you have to fix yourself if you have something to fix, and we all have something to fix. And so I'm not throwing stones, but I'm just saying is, when it comes to agency specifically, yeah, I had one agent and she asked, she's like, I don't know if it's a me thing or if it's, my area, but I keep turning people over. I'm like, well, regardless of which one it is, like you obviously need us, but I do think all of us as agents should look and even go back to our teams and say, what am I lacking? And if you have trustworthy people, they'll tell you. But yeah, if you're constantly turning people over all the time, there's something that's not quite right about your situation, and it could be a culture thing too, which also starts with us as agents.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense because in my simple brain, I always think about everything sort of in a sales view, or at least like in an insurance sales view, where it's like you can have the really good salesperson that writes the life app, but then they aren't very good at following the underwriting and making sure it gets issued. Right. So what are you doing in your office? What do you recommend where it's like, okay, you got them in, right? You closed them, but now you've got to keep them happy, make sure they go through the steps for onboarding, culture, you name it. What are you doing there to sort of like instill that in them and yeah, just what's your onboarding look like to get them bought into your culture, into your agency?
Yeah, the onboarding. So you're talking about onboarding team members, not necessarily onboarding
Right.
customers,
Yeah,
right?
team members. Yeah, team
Yeah.
members.
Well, the big thing is you need to have a plan. It sounds like a dumb thing to say, but like I think sometimes we hire somebody, and some agents don't hire as much or as frequently as I do, of course, and so they might not have the onboarding processes buttoned up. But to have someone come in and have them just click through module training and then job shadow for a handful of days, it's probably not the best experience. So you got to think about what's going to make the person that's starting, because when you hire somebody, like, you're not 100% sure if it's going to work out. They're definitely second guessing themselves too. Like, they're wondering, did I really just take this insurance job? Right? Like, is this
Hmm.
really my life? Like, and then they show up day one and they get stuck in the corner clicking modules, for the full day. And then the next day they kind of bounce around and getting tossed around to job shadow, and nobody really wants to have them next to them, but someone's got to do it. And so they're just kind of passing this person around. And after the first, and then it's like, well, here's a phone, like, start calling this old list of something, and it was limited or no training. And so you think about that experience, the day one of no human interaction, you're just in a corner getting, clicking all day. Then you get bounced around to a bunch of people that don't really want to pay much attention to you. And then you get handed a phone with minimal training, and you're just getting your ass kicked, getting hung up on all day long. And so by the end of the first week, there's a lot of folks that are like, man, I don't know about this. Like, Target's paying $18 an hour too. So, and they start to wonder, maybe I should go back over that way. But so my process is I don't think it's anything overly like sophisticated, but there's a process. Every single day, there's a plan. Throughout the day, there's structure. They know what they're going to be doing. We know what they're going to be doing. There's multiple people involved in their coaching and training. So certain pieces are owned by this person, certain pieces are owned by that person. My office manager takes a lot of that on. Um, and we try to keep it simple. That's another big mistake I see agents making is we have, and regardless of the carrier you're representing, you're probably selling how many different policies? 50 to 100 probably. You really start adding it up, and then in addition to the policies that we have to sell, how many different service transactions are there that you may have to learn and deal with? I don't care to have my new salespeople good at everything. I certainly don't care if they're any good at servicing stuff. Yeah, now they got to be a decent human being and communicate and treat people the right way. But as far as being able to exchange vehicles or answer the intricacies of a payment plan issue, if I hire them to sell insurance, I want them to get good at selling insurance. They can stumble around and figure that out later or not, for all I care. But I also don't care if they can sell all 100 products. I want them to sell one right away, and
Sure.
then two, and then eventually
Yep.
three. And for us, we have multi-line reps, so we have some generalist sales and some specialized sales. But what I call multiple line reps, they sell auto, fire, life, health. And so they need to get really good, in my opinion, at selling auto insurance first. Because if you can't do that at a high level, you're probably not going to get into enough fire, enough life, enough, health, disability, those things. So we want to get really good at picking up the phone, getting people to answer the phone and keeping them on the phone, and then going through an auto conversation and delivering an accurate price. I know if we can get someone to do that 4 times a day, if I can get a sales rep to get 4 legitimate quotes provided to a prospect a day, we're going to close 1 out of 4. 1 out of 4 household does probably 1.5 cars, probably at least 1 fire product. They might stumble over a financial service throughout the month, 2 or 2. So when you think about that, 20 business days, 1.5 cars is 30 raw new auto a month. 15 to 20 fire, and probably a handful of life and health by just understanding the numbers and getting good at one thing first. So we want to make sure that they get really good at one thing first, and then we start to add to it. But I find agents sometimes they think they got to train them in all these different product lines that they'll never get to anyway anytime soon. And then they wake up in 60 days, the person hasn't sold anything, and the agents are looking at this hire thinking this person's failed us. But really it's like, no, they're trying to do 100 things, or at least 30 to 60 things in the first 30 to 60 days, and our brains don't work that way. Or if you would have given them one thing to master first, there's a damn good chance they would have been successful with that thing. And so you got to ask yourself, when you hire somebody, what am I hiring them to do? At the end of the day, if you wake up in 60 days and they're only good at this one thing, is that okay? And if it is, focus on that one thing first.
Sure. Okay. No, I like that. It just kind of like just build them up and make sure they're winning. And yeah, I think sometimes if I went around to like the clients that I'm working with, and even just thinking about it to myself, yeah, what did I hire this person to do? If someone can't answer that question, that's probably the core of the problem they're having. So going back to recruiting here, what do a lot of agents and business owners get wrong about recruiting?
The biggest thing, I love this question, by the way, because I have to fight this battle every day.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is having a false sense of what's required to do this job. Like a lot of the agents that I know, that I recruit for or across the country, they wouldn't have hired me in 2009.
Mhm.
They would have seen the resume and be like, what does this guy think he's doing? And I wouldn't have even applied because I would have agreed with him at that time. But I find a lot of agents eliminating large segments of the population because of what they think is important. When I'm live, in front of say 100 agents in a room, I'll have them stand
Mhm.
up and I'll say, okay, if you had a 4-year college degree before you got recruited by the carrier that you're representing, remain standing. Some will be standing, some will sit down. If now the next question is, all right, well, if you had sales experience before you got recruited by your company, please remain standing. Everybody else have a seat. All right. If you had your insurance licenses before getting recruited by the company you represent, please remain standing. And the last question, if you're bilingual, you speak multiple languages, remain standing. And if you look across the room, out of 100, usually there's 1 or 2 that check all 4 of those boxes. And I'll look around and say, look around. Not one of us or 2 of us are qualified to do this job based off of what you all are telling me you want in your next hire. Those are the things that people are wanting to see. You want college degrees, you want sales experience, you want insurance licenses, you want multiple language being spoken, and you're not even qualified yourself. At least you weren't back when you got an opportunity. So what are we doing here? You wouldn't have hired yourself. And we forget that as agents, where we came from. And then also, just having like ideas of what's going to be a problem. I've had agents say, "Well, I don't want anybody from retail." I'm like, well, what are you talking about? Well, I had a bad experience once. Okay, that's not data. You hired one person from retail, didn't work out. That's not data. Because I have someone on my team from retail, and she is amazing. You know, um, I have someone on my team that was a cook at a nursing home. And at the time she was living in a trailer park. A lot of agents wouldn't have interviewed this person, let alone hired her. And she's 100 policies a month, selling crossed all lines. She's a pleasure to be around, very grateful for the opportunity. Doesn't have 8 other job offers waiting for her in her inbox. Didn't walk in commanding this $80,000 salary or something, higher than normal for your area. And agents kind of turn their nose up at these people sometimes and say, well, they got to have this thing. It's like, well, what are you talking about? Go to your local diner, go to the coffee shop, go to whatever, and just talk to people and find someone that's very personable, that's energetic, that's passionate, that's like likable. And if you find that person, they could probably sell our service insurance. I have people on my team that are those A players on paper. And right now they're very good. I've also had some of those unicorn type folks that were not very good because they're fairly entitled. They come in, they want more money, they think they're better than other people for whatever reason. And the reality is, it's very humbling for them because they find out this person down the hall that has nothing to show for anything is kicking their ass every single day. And that's a tough thing for them to get over. And sometimes they can't. Sometimes they do, and that's great. But sometimes they can't. And so I'm not saying don't hire someone with a 4-year degree or whatever. I have a degree now too. That's cool. But I'm just saying it doesn't make you sell more insurance. There's nothing about a piece of paper. It's like, all right, since he graduated with a criminal justice degree or a communications degree or whatever degree, he's going to sell more. She's going to sell more. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Talk to them. What's their personality like? What's their phone voice like? That's way more important than whatever their degree is, and I promise you.
Well, I mean, that's an interesting point. That kind of takes you to the next question I had, because yeah, I'm sitting here with a human physiology degree, and most of our team, this was their first insurance and sales job. They've never done either, but I think I got the part of my question answered, where it's like, should you only look for experience, or should you kind of just look for people you like? I think I've got that answered, but so I guess really, do you have a preference now? Do you have a preference over experience, or would you rather kind of start someone totally green?
Green, and I think anybody that has any ability at all to train a new hire should prefer that. And with folks like yourself that can help train people for them, nobody should be looking for someone with experience exclusively. Now, I've had there's exceptions to this rule, but what I say, if you have 10 people apply to your agency that have their insurance licenses already, 9 of them are not worth hiring. If they were so damn good, they wouldn't be applying to your job. They'd be making money for
Right.
themselves or for somebody else at a high level. They wouldn't be applying for your agency. I can guarantee you that. There's exceptions to that, but the only person I've hired with sales experience, well, one was a furniture salesperson. The other person did have insurance sales experience, but I knew the agent that he worked for. The agent was going into a leadership role within the company, and so I knew this. I actually personally knew this person, and I knew what he was able to do. I've seen him selling the products he needed to sell, so
Hmm.
it's an easy decision for me. But that's an exception to the rule. Most people, again, the reason agents want experience is because they're lazy when it comes to onboarding and training. And I say that respectfully, if that, with all due respect, but
Right.
they want to plug and play, and we all want the easy button. Like, we all want to push the easy button and get. But what the fact of the matter is that that option doesn't exist for most people. You're going to plug someone in that failed somewhere else, or is bringing baggage, bringing their way of doing it, or they're just downright not very good. And so if you have the ability to onboard and train somebody, I'd rather take someone that doesn't know anything about anything, but has a great personality, great phone voice, they're coachable, they're energetic, they're passionate, they're excited, they're motivated, like all those things that have nothing to do with those other qualities we talked about earlier. Um, Man, we can get them to sell insurance. We can get them to service insurance. And so, yeah, I don't care about experience. I'm going to give them the experience that they need to be.
Sure. Well, and I always think too, like, I don't want any bad habits. I don't want what they knew from another insurance company. I don't want them making up anything. I'd almost prefer, like I said, even no sales experience, let alone no insurance experience. But I'm glad someone that recruits way more than me also feels that way, because then it makes me feel a little better.
One more
Um,
one more comment, if I could, on
of
this
course.
topic too. I want to talk about the math behind looking for that, because we get a lot. Like, so we have some agents that will say, "I don't want to interview anybody unless they have their licenses." And I'll reply with, well, you do understand that if you were to round to the nearest percent of the population that has their insurance licenses, you'd be rounding to 0% of the population. So you can see how that would interfere with our ability to put good pre-screened people in
Right.
front of you, right? Like, so
Right.
it's not a reasonable expectation to have solely experienced insurance salespeople put in front of you consistently. Not saying you should turn them away, give them a look, but have your guard up when you give them a look, and certainly don't only interview those people because you're going to have not enough team members for the rest of your career.
Sure. When it comes to getting applicants, reviewing applicants, how important is the resume, and what are you guys looking at?
I think it's a way to triage their situation. So if you're using an applicant tracking system and getting multiple applicants, like you have a lot to kind of work through. I think some assessments on the front side, resumes, all that's a good way to triage the situation. So if you have 100 applicants in there and you got to kind of whittle it down to a handful to phone screen and get in front of people, it helps. I don't think that it's everything. If it's a complete disaster with the technology that people have at the disposal, it's not hard to put together a decent resume. You don't have to be that savvy, right? So it's, um, but as far as like, so I mean, I don't want a bunch of spelling errors. I don't want too much craziness going on in there, but I don't overthink it. Like, there's some agents that be like, man, he had 3 different jobs in the last 4 years. Well, it's like, well, we also were coming out of COVID. What else was going on? Like maybe the person graduated, they had, a job in college and they graduated, moved, and there's a beginner job. Now they, who knows? Like
Yeah.
instead of disqualifying the candidate, why don't you talk to him? Why don't you ask him some questions? I have a great team member where he was working at, look, A, and then went to work on a farm, B, and when asked like, well, what's up with the job shift? And you went from this to that. He's a cook here, and then back over on the farm. He's like, well, my dad got sick, and I had to move home to
Mhm.
help. Well, that's a pretty damn good excuse. Right? But if we just would have said farmer, throwaway, we wouldn't have had this person on our team. So we need to not overlook what's in the resume, even the assessments. Like I don't want to over assess people.
Mhm.
Because when you could point to an assessment and say, well, this assessment, like, man, I had the person that didn't do well, he failed at my office, and it's like, well, how many people? Like, that's still not necessarily data, right? That's an experience, but for every one story of, well, this assessment said this, and then sure enough, this happened, I could tell you 2 more stories where the assessment said this, but luckily, this person went on to do this, that, and the other successfully. And so I don't put a ton of emphasis on any one assessment. It's just part of the story. Um, but we got to understand that, when you go looking for reasons to disqualify people, it's easy to disqualify people. And I'm not saying you have to give time to every person that applies to interview, but like when in doubt, I want quantity of interviews for my agent over quality because quality is so subjective. But through quantity, through volume, you're going to have some success. And you know this better than anybody in the sales training world. Like if you're teaching someone to sell life insurance, you're not saying, hey, only meet with the perfect prospects. If they're not a perfect prospect for life insurance, do not even sit with them because you wouldn't sell very much. But if you just
Right.
get in front of anybody for the most part that's willing to talk to you about life insurance and you have 20 life insurance appointments a month versus 2, chances are you're going to sell some stuff. And chances are there's going to be some people that you would have never thought was going to be a great prospect that's going to buy that large permanent annual pay policy that you didn't even know they had because they drove this 94 Buick, but they're worth $4.6 million, and you didn't know that, but you got in front of them and you learned that about them. And that's how recruiting goes. You get in front of people, talk to people. If it's a bad interview, make it 15 minutes, make a friend, make a customer out of it, maybe move them along. If it's something special, hang out with them a little bit longer and see where it goes. But I don't think there's anything better we can do with our time as agents than sitting across from the next best thing for our teams, for our agencies. It's not training our team. You can delegate that out. And if you had a bigger and better team, you wouldn't have to be personally involved in that as much. It's not meeting with customers because if you had a bigger and better team, you could also have your team members doing more of that for you. It is building your team, recruiting, getting in front of people, interviewing. That's going to make you way more money than any sale that you're going to make that week.
Right. Well, and you've probably heard the saying too. It's an old saying in the life insurance world, but the elephant hunters go broke. And like I'll have clients that say, like the only problem is we don't have a lot of high net worth clients. There isn't a lot of really rich people in our area, so we can't sell much life insurance or health insurance or whatever. Um, and my comeback is always, well, it's always a few things, right? It's like, well, first of all, high net worth people aren't really touching our stuff most of the time. They probably already have it taken care of with a financial advisor. Um, Two, it's shouldn't just come from existing customers, right? It can come from raw new as well. And three, you just got to have a way to talk to everybody about it, right? Because it's just like you said, it's a numbers game. It's a quantity thing. But in situations where it may be a little harder to get quantity, right? So maybe it's a rural agent in a small area. And I know you're in a small area too. What do you tell the agents out there that maybe aren't in a really big town, big city? There aren't a lot of, maybe they're not in a college town. That's another one I hear, right? There's a lot of college students. What do you do there? How do you recruit there?
I want to answer that question, but I want to comment on something you talked about real quick, just to drive home the point on like selling life insurance to big net worth individuals. One thing, well, two things there. One, we have a customer base that might not fit into that where I live and where most agents are, right? That doesn't mean they don't deserve the opportunity to talk about a product that can change
Yeah.
generations for the better or
Yeah.
worse, right? And so we have a moral obligation to have conversations with these people, regardless of their net worth. But um, and we understand that, but I do understand there are some agents tumors that focus on the money, but it doesn't always work out in their favor. But if you look at the math behind the money and finding money, like I think average household income in my legacy town, a legacy office, Owasso, it's like 50K ish last time I checked. Not a lot of money, right? And so if your average household income is 100,000, well, in theory, like the average case should be able to be a little bit more. Like we try to focus on, keeping it within 2 to 4% of the gross household income as far as life insurance, right? So
Mm.
we're trying
Yep.
to capture 2% of their gross household income allocated towards life insurance. We're gonna have 2% of 50,000 versus 2% of 100,000. So it's like, yeah, is there a difference? Um, does it make it a little bit more challenging? Sure. But my simple mind says, well, if we met with twice as many people, we would easily get to where where this person is. And if we 3x that, we would exceed them and then some. And
Right.
so why can't we do that? And we can. And so every market's better and worse for some reasons. The grass is always greener for some agents and whatever.
Right.
But you got to figure out where you can win and go hard there, but not necessarily give up on the other things too, because you have a little bit of a disadvantage. Because that's not fair. Because there are agents right down the road from the agents that's making that excuse that's doing it at a very high level. And so, but I say that all to transition into your question around recruiting because the same thing goes. I talk to an agent in a small town like me, and they're like, man, I don't know if you can do it here because I'm in a small town. You talk to an agent in the big city, it's like, man, I'm in a big city. There's 20 agents within driving distance of my agency. It makes it really difficult. So I've seen it all. I've heard it all from every market. And there are harder areas than others, not necessarily big town versus small town. I'm talking just like parts of the country. Certain areas are more challenging to drum up applicant flow within the applicant tracking system in comparison to some. And yes, there's some, cities that have more competition, more headquarters of corporations and things, universities and different things. But um, that's also where we need to focus, where we can win as agents. What can we do? What can we provide that those people can't? And sometimes that's flexibility in schedules. Sometimes that's remote opportunities, which is going to kind of lead me to answer your question. Like if you are struggling locally, we have the technology. We're sitting here today having a great conversation. I'm in Michigan, and you're where again? I'm sorry,
Iowa. Iowa.
Iowa, right? And so we have the technology to do what we need to do with our teams, regardless of where they are located. So there's no excuse of, well, I got to pay them double here because my area is so expensive, or it's such a small town, there's not enough people. Go remote. It's doable. But with that said, those small town agents that say, man, I don't have a lot of population, I don't have a university to pull from, you just got to get more creative with who you allow to be on your team. Like you might not have that college graduate that has that business background, that has that experience in sales or whatever it might be. Like, but you do have a local diner,
Hmm.
that probably does have someone that is freaking awesome that will bring you your coffee in the morning, but you've never really taken the time to talk to him or her about anything outside of that. So you got to get more creative with where you're finding your talent. Um, and I will say, like, those people, again, more affordable, more loyal, just as good at selling insurance. Very grateful for the opportunity. They don't have a lot of opportunities coming their way, so they're not necessarily going to leave you anytime soon, too. So, um, if I had to choose between a big city and small town to have an agency, I can make the case for either. All three of my agencies are in fairly smaller towns. So if I had a fourth, I would love to have one in a bigger city just to kind of diversify, but
Sure.
not because it's a better opportunity. There's perks to both, and there's also downsides to both, probably too.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's all really good, especially because too, like in the rural areas, like especially if you get someone going, you trust them, you delegate to them, they could be one of the highest paid people in the town if they're at an insurance agency, and they will talk about buy-in and not going anywhere because they want to live in a small town, but they also want more opportunity for themselves, for their family. So I really like that. Well, I know we've talked a lot about recruiting too, uh, but what makes autopilot recruiting different, right? I know like you can charge differently. I heard you have headhunters. What makes you guys different?
Yeah, well, just real quickly on the headhunting. The headhunting is a very small piece of what we do. We have a headhunter on staff that he looks for securities licensed team members for insurance agents, and so very small piece of what we do. So I'll focus on what we do at a bigger scale that is unique for us, really, that separates us from any of the competition. And the biggest thing is the consistency behind what we do. We have a team of well, actually, the biggest thing, the number one thing that separates us from any competition is the individuals that actually do the recruiting. I'll start there. And so we have a team of about 150.
Wow.
Out of the
I don't
150,
know how you manage that.
yeah, good people.
Yeah.
We have good people leading and managing that in addition to myself. So, but out of the 150, about 145 are female. Out of the 145, I'd say 85% are moms. Out of the entire group, probably 40% are either ex-military or military spouses.
Interesting.
And so, yeah, so we've created an opportunity that is an awesome opportunity for these individuals because I find that females in particular, oftentimes that need or want to be involved at home still at a big level. Take the kids to school, pick them up from school, go to the Halloween party, leave early for the track meet, like those types of things. There's certain really overqualified individuals that have trouble finding opportunities that's going to allow them
Mhm.
to have that flexibility. And so sometimes they get stuck just staying home and not contributing financially, even though they want to, but they don't want to sacrifice all this other stuff to clock in and do the 9 to 5. And so I find individuals that need that and want that are overqualified, that could go out and work a 9 to 5 and get paid double or triple or more, doing a lot of different things, but they still choose to come work for Autopilot because of the lifestyle that they can maintain while also contributing financially, while also making a difference to multiple lives, and also being a part of an awesome team with an awesome culture, even though everybody's remote from all over the country. So the people that I have doing the job, doing the work, really makes a difference. Someone could copy and paste the exact same business model tomorrow, and they won't ever beat us because the people that I have in my team, there's better quality individuals. So that's the first thing, and then secondly, there's really nothing out there that's done what we do at scale, where we recruit every single business day, no matter what. So if an agent's on the golf course, recruiting is happening. If he or she is on a incentive trip for 2 weeks, recruiting is getting done every single business day. If the person's sick, if the person's whatever, like recruiting is done every single business day, no matter what. If we have a recruiter that's sick or gone, we have subs that step in and continue on,
Sure.
do that for them daily. And through that consistency piece and the ways that we do it, um, man, to me, it's a marathon. Every once in a while, I'll have an agent say like, I could do this myself better. And it's like, well, you might be able to like sprint faster than us. So if you just like dove in and your whole day was consumed with recruiting, like maybe for a few days you could beat us in a sprint, but you're never going to beat us in a marathon. I do this every single business day forever. And that's when we find the best people. I find the agents that desperately recruit when they have to, they make really bad decisions. Going to the grocery store hungry, you make bad decisions, it gets really
Right.
expensive. But if you're just consistent in this thing, you're going to get staffed up. You're going to be plus one in staff. You're going to develop a bench of good people ready to go. And when you do that, when someone does quit on you, you're not making desperate decisions. You're already in a good place. And we're going to work to get you in a better place faster. And that over time will make you so much more money over the course of your career by having enough people and the right people and not having gaps too big within your production year. It'll be the difference in millions of dollars over the course of your career. I'm very confident in making that statement, and I walk the walk. That's probably the final thing I'll say when it comes to the difference between me and some of the competition is I do it. I'm an agent myself. It was started and created because of the way I was recruiting for my own agencies, and I rolled it out to others, and now we have 2,000 that are doing the same thing. So, um, hopefully that helps make the case for Autopilot.
Well, and it's something that I was going to comment on that I'm still kind of like in shock about is, earlier you were saying, yeah, if you're in a rural area, you have to be creative. Whenever you're hiring, you got to know your area and be creative to sort of like solve that hiring problem. And, in my the first thing that goes through my head is, well, yeah, it's easy to say, right? But then you explain that you have like over 100 ex-military spouses, moms that are actively recruiting for you in between their like track meets for their kids and stuff. And I'm just like, one, never even thought about that facet of the of the American economy, right? Just like who of that person, and let alone them being very good at recruiting, but like that's being creative. That's like sort of finding what works. And honestly, probably there aren't a lot of people going after those ladies either, trying to hire them for recruiting
Right.
companies. You've been able to build something that no one can really replicate very easily, at least. So,
Well, and the last thing I'll say about that quality aspect of them is that because it's such a good opportunity and it's spread like wildfire in the military community, we have a bench of as many as we want. When we open up for the world to apply, we'll have thousands, literally
sure.
thousands apply. So
Wow.
think about we have thousands to pick from. The ones that get through, and we make mistakes sometimes, and I'll talk about that too in a second. But the quality level of what we do, of who we bring in and maintain is spectacular. I mean, it's something special. It really, really is. And when we find out we've made a mistake, and this is my advice for agents out there too, because this is the bar to stay on my team, whether it be agency team or recruiting team. If I wouldn't let you sell our service insurance to my closest friends or family, you can't sell our service insurance to anybody. You-
Right.
Right. And if I wouldn't want you to recruit for me as an agent, you can't recruit for any agents,
I
any
love that.
peers, any of those in the industry. So that's the bar. And when we find that anybody's dropped below that, they're gone. We fired 2 recruiters yesterday.
Wow.
So and so um, we take it very, very seriously. If someone's not doing what we want them to do at the level that we want them to do it, they're no longer doing it. And that's my commitment to the agency force, is that we're going to bring you quality people. And if we make a mistake, we're going to make it right. And my challenge to you is make sure you do the same within your agency.
Right. I mean, we're coming up to time here, and I'm gonna be respectful of your time. I gotta have you back because I feel like I haven't even made a dent in the questions I wanted to ask you. Um, but if I could just leave everybody with like one thing, or you could leave everybody with one thing, something that I was curious about is like if you just had a couple tips, like what makes a killer job posting to get more applicants? What's got to be on it? What would you include?
I think what I would think about, knowing that your area might be fairly unique to you, what would make you apply? Or at least when you were at that stage of your life, what would make you apply? I was on a podcast a couple years ago, and someone asked me about if offering health benefits and retirement and PTO and flexibility and those things, if I thought that would attract lazy people. And I asked the guy, I'm like, well, do you like those things? Do you appreciate those things? And he said, well, yeah. And I go, well, are you lazy? And I thought it was an
Yeah,
absurd question. I mean, nice guy.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
thought it was an absurd question. Like, well, since when is having like those things making like wanting to retire one day, wanting to have time off paid
Right,
sometimes, wanting a little bit of flexibility, wanting to be paid a fair salary with an opportunity for maybe some upside financially. Since when is that like that's not the lazy segment of the population that we need to worry about. Like we know who those people are. They make it very clear, right? You can spot them a mile away.
right.
Purple hair. But I don't think that wanting those things make people lazy. So when it comes to job postings, make it attractive. Make it attractive. Make it something that if you're past that stage in the game and you have maybe a 20-year-old, 30-year-old kid or 25, like, what would make him or her, your daughter or son apply that, and make you as a father or wife say, or husband, what mom say, I'm proud of her for working there. That sounds like a pretty good opportunity. That's going to attract people, and it's going to, even maybe more importantly, it's going to retain people. If you don't offer any of those things, you might get some people to say yes to you, but they're not going to say yes to you forever, because it's not a long-term opportunity, just strictly a stepping stone to the next thing. And that's not the end of the world, but you're going to have a lot of turnover over the years. And so Yeah, just make it an attractive, appealing thing, and understand that one little tip about that compensation piece: don't advertise like the minimum that you're willing to pay. Right. So if you're willing to pay $20 an hour, that's cool. But if, or maybe make it more easy, let's say if it's your salary's $30,000, not the end of the world. But if they're, say, commissions and bonuses can easily get them to 50,000 by just being average, why on earth would you show them a range of salary that shows them what they'll make if they're below average or if they don't sell anything?
Mm.
When you're interviewing, they're going to say, hire me. I'm going to sell a lot of insurance for you. I'm going to be great. We'll advertise what that will make them if they do what they said they were going to do. I'm not saying inflate it and exaggerate it so it's not accurate, but if someone can make 50 to 70, maybe put in 50 to 70. Um, I wouldn't do huge ranges too. Indeed doesn't
Mm.
like big ranges. You know, you don't.
Okay.
There's a lot of bad advice out there on what to put in there. You don't need to drop billions of postings at once. Indeed knows that's not true. That you don't have 20 jobs available at the same time. They're going to penalize you for that, make you less visible. They don't like huge ranges. Someone put in 50,000 to 150. And yes, I get that maybe it could range between a 50 and 150. Indeed doesn't like that. So yeah, just those are a few tips and tricks. Hopefully that helps.
No, yeah, no, that's super helpful. And to your point earlier too, like if you are doing that like minimal and advertising, hey, if you do nothing, you can make at least 30,000, then maybe you will get those lazy people that you were so worried about, you know?
Sure.
So
That's fair.
cool. Well, thank you so much, Alex. This has been a wealth of knowledge and it's been super cool to get to know you a lot better. But yeah, thanks again.
You're welcome. Happy to be here. I'd love to come back.